Starting your own Dungeons & Dragons campaign is one of the most exciting yet difficult things you could ever do as a dungeon master. Starting one, especially your own completely homebrew, completely unique and original piece, is a very stressful and alien process. And starting one is probably one of the hardest things to do, because where do you start? Where are you going? Where am I? Here are a couple things you can do to get started on your Dungeons & Dragons campaign and to make sure your players have fun. Before you even start your campaign, before you even start putting a city or a town anywhere, make sure you familiarize yourself with the rules. Nobody really likes rules. Everyone likes to bend them, to break them, or do a whole matter of strange things to the rules. But in essence, no matter what edition of Dungeons & Dragons you're playing, you may even not even be playing Dungeons & Dragons, you're playing Roblox, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, something. But understanding the core rules of whatever you're playing, in this case Dungeons & Dragons, is extremely important for not only you, but the players that will be in the campaign. You see, when a player comes into a campaign, they're expecting, at minimum, the most basic rules. So just getting a feel for what those are, say, what the classes do, the rules for rolling an ability check or saving throw, just knowing what that is puts you leagues ahead of where you need to be. So make sure you do it. Number dos. Make sure you do not get ahead of yourself. This is a very broad and blanket statement, of course, but it needs to be. Getting ahead of yourself when making a campaign is a very easy thing to do and a very easy thing to damage the health of your campaign. When your players are still level 1 and in the same town you started the first session in, don't make things that the players aren't going to care about nor see. Keep yourself on track, see where the players are going, and if you have some plot hooks going on, just see where they go. You don't have to plan every meticulous bit ahead of time, because chances are your players will do something that you didn't see coming and blow everything out of the water and you're at step 0. Just create some general outlines and have a good time. Don't worry about the dwarven fortress that is 3,000 miles away from where your party is, because chances are they might not even go there. And if the point didn't get across, just don't make anything super complicated unless the players have an expressed interest in it. For example, say you don't have much going on a distant land, but your players are like, wow, I want to go to that distant land. I want to see what treasures and what little platoons they have with treasures. Then, in which case, you can develop that distant land a little more. Perhaps it's made of candy, and perhaps you're the candy man now, and there's a big ship made of peppermint, or something. But you get my point, is you can develop things when needed. Another important thing to know is, what story do you want to tell? If, at all, you even want to tell a story. A traditional RPG experience, going out on unrelated quests, getting cool gear, leveling up, getting more powerful, and just finding strange things about the world, but none of it is particularly story-driven. And some people like their campaign that way, but others prefer a more story-driven experience. Perhaps, even from the very beginning, there's a prelude to an old god awakening, and throughout the several years of your party's adventure, they figure out, hey, this god's gonna rise over here on this mountain, we should prepare an army for it. Or perhaps it's something a little more tame, that perhaps there's a political uprising, but it's all incognito, and your party needs to investigate and find out who's at the heart of this conspiracy. Just scope out what your players want and what you want. Because perhaps you want a more, just traditional RPG experience. You're going around and that goblin over there. Oh, I leveled up, wow. But instead, your players want a more story-driven experience with some strange thing going on. And there's a conflict of interest now, and neither of you are having fun. I believe I have said something similar to this in a previous video, where I basically just said, read the room and see where things should go. This leads me into a similar point, and a lot of Dungeon Masters overlook this, perhaps in their first or even 8th campaign. what kind of campaign are you running here? Do you want to run something with lots of magic and it's very lighthearted and it's a very sparkly, fun adventure? Or perhaps you want to run something very devious, very demon-like. Everything is out to get you. The conspiracy is everywhere. The demons are rising from places nobody even knew existed. It's very gritty, it's very dark. There's blood and dismemberment everywhere you go. And it keeps getting darker and darker and darker and darker. Just keep in mind the theme of your campaign. If it's gritty or lighthearted, it's up to you, but also make sure that your players enjoy it. Because again, I've also said this in a previous video, if Mr. Sparkle Elf wants to be Mr. Sparkle Elf, don't put him in the most dangerous and dark, creepy, gross area he could possibly be in. Unless that is a very specific niche you are going for. And lastly, I keep saying, yo, you want to explore this, or perhaps you want to do this. But I didn't mention the fact that you might want to explore more cultural themes. And this is something that you should definitely explore in your campaign. Perhaps you're a fan of ancient Romans, so why not research the ancient Romans a little bit, see what they did, and see what you can apply to your campaign. Not only is this a good way to get you started, because you already have a base to work off of, but it's cool. Who doesn't like the ancient Romans? I mean, come on, it's the ancient Romans. I mean, look at this. Look at that. Ooh. Or perhaps you don't want to do a culture per se, but you want to do something more like how different cultures react to death and what the rituals behind that are. Perhaps death is a very big part of your campaign and you want to explore different rituals, different cultures, different races, different lands even that are based upon death. I know it's a very dark example, but I think it's a good example because there's lots of things you can explore in a campaign to give it lots of depth, and it's not necessarily that hard to do. In fact, it might make your job easier. Basically what I'm saying is just do a little bit of real-world research before you start your campaign and see what you can apply. I hope this video was helpful to you in some way. I've been exploring some strange themes myself more recently as my campaign actually winds down and I begin to formulate a new one. I want to go for a more gritty experience and my players seem pretty alright with that. So I will maybe make a video explaining a little bit about my world someday, but until then, have a good day. Adios.